All right, good afternoon everyone. This is a short council meeting for one item on the agenda. And thank you very much for agreeing to come today to this. So the first item are apologies. Now I have apologies from Councillor Wilson and Councillor Pascoe and Councillor McPherson. Are there any other? I think that covers everyone.
Gloves off.
Oh, and the Deputy
Mayor is not
Yes.
here.
And the Deputy Mayor. So I'll move that, seconded by Councillor Tooman. All those in favour?
Aye.
Any against? Carried, thank you. Right, the agenda is, as I said, one item, which is item 4. So I'll move the agenda, seconded by Councillor Young. All those in favour? Any against? Carried. Declarations of interest? No? Thank you. So Luke, welcome.
I just make a note that there were 2 of us on the panel.
Yes,
I don't think that's a declaration, but it's
No.
just being transparent, that's all.
Yes. So Luke, welcome along. So councillors, it's item 4 on page 5, which is a report about the Ferrybank development plan. So Luke, you can take it as read, but if you would like to speak to it or highlight any of the main points.
Thank you, Worship. Good afternoon, everyone. As you've indicated, I'll take the report as read, but essentially what it is, it's largely this is a procedural report in accordance with an earlier resolution that this council had made about signing off on the results of a tender evaluations in relation to the first project to be delivered through the river plan. That's for the Ferrybank development plan. Council signed off on a design brief on the 30th of July, then we went to the market and called for expressions of interest through a 3-stage procurement process. Essentially the first stage was a pre-qualification stage, and from that 3 firms were shortlisted and asked to submit concepts, and those concepts have been evaluated by a tender evaluation panel, and the results of that panel are that they recommend to council to execute a contract with a consortium led by Ray Athfield and Associates, and the report is seeking essentially that you endorse that recommendation of the tender evaluation panel and for the Chief Executive to execute that contract. And I'm happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you for that. Are there questions for Luke? No?
Yeah, I've got questions.
Okay, thank you, Councillor King.
We've been given this. This is words and not many. I'm not on any, what is it you're on, Martin?
Panel.
The panel. So what am I actually voting on? I haven't been, normally I've been given this walking into this meeting, it's sitting on my desk, and that's all I've got.
Yeah.
So
Luke,
I'm,
So
I know that some of you in this room are very familiar with it, but there's a lot of us in this room who, this is the first, we're being asked to vote on something.
no, you're being asked to execute a contract that's in accordance with an early resolution that you made that outlined a procurement process. This concept drawing here is one of a series of documents that were provided as part of that concept plan stage, and this is what was publicly exhibited. You recall through this procurement process, the 2 preferred tenders before we got to this evaluation recommendation were publicly exhibited. This is for your information to show you the concept that is being recommended by the evaluation panel. The evaluation panel considered the 3 designs and got down to this particular one, which is the one that they're recommending to execute a contract. This is not the final concept. What will happen is throughout the finalisation of the final Ferrybank development plan that there will be opportunities. There will be 2 we envisage workshop sessions or presentations by the preferred firm should the contract be executed, where we come back and show you the progress that's being made, and then once again council will get a final decision to sign off on the final plan, which is scheduled for July or August. So this is not we're not saying that this is the Ferrybank plan. We're saying this is the concept that has been recommended by the evaluation panel to award a contract and then to finalise the Ferrybank development plan.
So I think Councillor King, just for clarity, I think what Councillor King is wanting to make sure is this the plan or is there a subsequent stage?
It's a subsequent
Which
stage.
is what we signed off originally. This is part of the process.
That's correct.
And did I hear you say that the intention is that there will be 2 workshop sessions at least with the councillors to provide input into as that design plan gets
Yeah,
developed?
we'd like to build that into the program, but obviously we haven't had a detailed program agreed to with the consultant yet because we've got no contract.
Right.
So
Okay.
So what you're saying is that the evaluation panel, who we're voting today to spend 150 grand, this is what you've seen, because this is all I've seen. So is this it?
no, this shows the concept. So the council have already agreed to a 3-stage procurement process. So that was a decision that was made in July. The first stage being a pre-qualification, and then a concept, and the concept's evaluated, and then the preferred concept is then the basis by which we execute a contract to finalise the development plan. So this is not the final version. This is a concept that's been evaluated by the tender evaluation panel to proceed to a detailed design.
So is this Mayor Hardacre and Councillor Gallagher, is this all you've seen?
No, I think the answer to your question, Councillor King, is in the July
Because this is all I've seen,
resolution.
and other members are
The
in. So
council delegated to an evaluation panel made up of subject matter experts and 2 representatives from the council to go through that evaluation process based on, the council standard procurement process. Yeah, so that was, I don't know what the resolution exactly, the details of it were.
But there was the
delegated
council
to the
agreed to that.
evaluation panel, and the evaluation panel has carried out that role. And no, of course, it has not just seen this, it has seen a lot more than that. And of course, has had verbal presentations by the shortlisted candidates. But I think my point is the council resolved to delegate that to an evaluation panel, which has completed its task and is now reporting back to council in line with that resolution.
That's correct.
For the council then to approve the next, what's going to happen for the next stage.
So
Councillor Gallagher, did you want to add anything to
yeah,
that?
hang on. My point here is normally we would be given something to make to get our heads around it and understand what's going on, but this is it, and it was only put in front of us as we sat down. Normally we would have something packaged up that would show us that we would get 4 days before the meeting, or
well,
2 full working days.
I mean,
before
you'll
the
need
meeting.
to, it's a staff report and the staff prepare the report. Councillor Gallagher, have you got anything else you want to add to this?
Well, I'll be very careful because this is an open meeting. There are issues of commercial sensitivity, so that actually does naturally constrain my contribution, as I think I'd indicated previously. The tender panel was essentially an external panel of professional representatives that were selected, by this council. There were 2 elected members on that panel, but I would assure you that very much while we were in the panel, we absolutely deferred, if you like, to those external panellists, and they went through a sort of a points and a weighting system. And I guess the decision today is the tender panel has come back with a recommendation as to which company proceeds in terms of the design of the concept, on the basis that there will be a further submission with the assistance of the tender panel back to full council. And I guess the final sort of decision in terms of the actual format and the shape of the design is later in the year. Would that be a fair?
That's correct.
summary?
At paragraph 34 of my report on page 7, that talks about the council sign-off stages throughout this whole process. So the council has made a decision to go down this procurement pathway. They've made a decision to delegate its authority to that evaluation panel to evaluate those concepts that were submitted to the council. And the purpose of this report is to report back the outcomes of that evaluation that the council's already endorsed, so that we can execute a contract.
And can I also add, sorry, Councillor Gallagher, after you.
Well, in essence, as I understand it, what the panel is doing is recommending a successful tender. You know, that whether or not you choose to accept their recommendation as to who the successful company should be proceeding with this plan. That's my understanding.
Yep. So just in summary, effectively today you're signing off a, like we do with all our tenders of a certain value, a procurement process. So it's in parallel to some of the reports that Chris Allen's brought forward for over a certain value for tenders. A robust procurement process has been entered into. It's considered a robust process. It was overseen by our procurement team. It included a matrices that Councillor Gallagher has already referred to of attributes and so forth, by which each of the three, we'll call them in this case, tenderers put forward, and they'll consider it against that criteria. Part of the checkpoint that was agreed as part of this process, that whilst delegation was given to the panel for consideration of those attributes, making sure that each of the tenderers stack up in terms of requirements, that it would be brought back to council just to ratify a recommended position based on that attribute approach, and as to who the tenderer is and who's successful, not the ultimate outcome of the concept. So this was an indication of what they brought forward, but today is about the tender process, more so than around the concept, which is the point that Councillor Gallagher was referring to.
Right. I think that's the answer to your questions, Councillor King. Hopefully that satisfies you.
So you're on the panel, Mayor Hardacre. Have you seen, I mean, how tall are these buildings that are going on here? Have you seen any indication of the 3D pictures showing height, floor area,
I think Councillor King,
types of tenants?
so I think Councillor King, you can be rest assured, and I'm sure Councillor Gallagher will back me up on this, that the expertise on the evaluation panel was of a high standard, and it represented a variety of sectors who would have the skills and knowledge to make an evaluation on the sort of group that could develop up this plan in detail. So this first stage, and as I understand it, councillors, you know, the report identified what these stages were, was about what the concept might look like. So the detail is the next stage.
So you haven't seen
I've
on
seen
off the ground pictures? This is all you've seen?
I've seen this and lots of other papers and discussions on the evaluation panel, and I'm not prepared to discuss in depth the discussions in the evaluation panel. Councillor Gallagher, do you have a view on that?
Well, unfortunately, and it may seem ironic, because I'm in Woburn government, as you know, and I want to have as much as possible an open session. However, when you are discussing from a commercial and reputational point of view the merits of one tender versus another, I'm actually constrained in making further comment.
We're not comparing. We're asking. You're asking us to sign off on a $150,000 project, and you've given us one piece of paper. Surely we're making a call of what direction we're going on. Some 3D pictures, some ground level photos, some stuff that you guys have seen. We're not comparing. We're only getting one tender here. We're not looking at the second one, the other one. I want to know what we're buying, and this doesn't tell me what we're buying.
Okay, so Councillor King, my recollection, again, unfortunately the resolution's not here, but we've already signed off on the budget.
The budget's approved. It's an approved budget through the long-term plan.
And these stages are already approved by council resolution.
But what am I? Well, maybe Mayor Hardacre, you can help me. How many stories high is the building next to the Age Concern?
We were given some indications about scale and size, but I am not prepared to discuss the process and discussions of the evaluation panel in this council meeting.
But isn't that what you're trying to sell us? Isn't this what we're voting on?
Gallagher, would you agree with that?
Look, I mean, I think it's a matter of, and I'll ask the Chief Executive, an elected member, obviously is requesting some extra information in terms of some of the detail which then formed the basis of the external tenders evaluation panel. And perhaps, Chief Executive, you can assist, because in other words, as I understand, an elected member wants more information in terms of beyond this report, because obviously this report is merely a summary document, a public summary document, that just focuses on a tender panel coming to purely award a contract to the successful tender, that I would probably argue that the huge detail comes in the next tranche, but...
Yep, so thank you, Councillor Gallagher. Councillor Gallagher is correct. So I'm going to go back to reinforce my words. This is a procurement process signing off the tender. This was a concept which included, effectively I'd use the words with quotes around it, ideas and possibilities for the site. Councillor Gallagher is correct. At the next stage, the detail comes through, and through the various opportunities to come back in council, we mentioned earlier the briefings and the workshop, this council will have an opportunity to hear some of those ideas and as well as an opportunity to influence them as well. So this is an opportunity to approve a tenderer to go to the next stage, but there's a degree of, I won't say blank sheet because they've already put a concept forward, but an opportunity for influence to be brought to bear in terms of some of those opportunities and outcomes.
I mean, in summary, we remind ourselves that the particular plans, projects were public, documents. They were out there. That's already been released, and I guess through the chief executive is the extra information or documentation that an elected member would want that helped informed the tender panel at the time.
We can make available all the information from the tender panels to the elected members. I mean, all the information that was presented at the tender panels was made available to the public for public consideration as public information.
But why hasn't it been presented to us 2 days ago when we got the report?
So,
Two full working days so that we actually could consider what we're voting on.
So today is about whether or not
whether we accept it or not.
No, so today is about whether you're comfortable that a due process was followed in respect of going through the tender process as was resolved by council. That's what today is about, and that's why the report was written in this context, because we believe that we have followed a robust procurement process following the instructions from council to get to a point whereby the tender evaluation process with integrity can recommend a way forward. And it's for us, through this report, we're providing forward to you that we believe that process has been followed, and the recommendation of that panel is valid. And so it's not about the concept, it's about whether or not that process was followed, whether or not the scoring was done appropriately. It's all to do with due process and due diligence of that process to come to a recommendation today. It's not whether we believe one concept's better than another as staff, it's whether or not that process has been followed. And we believe it has.
If I could just add to that, the Chief Executive is correct. There's the evaluative function of this part of the process was delegated to the tender evaluation panel. So, as I've highlighted in the report, the risk here is that if a decision is not made to endorse the recommendation of the tender evaluation panel, the procurement process is null and void. So, I accept your comments about information, and that's a comment I would agree with, and that's my fault for not providing that information. But the information provided at this meeting shows the preferred concept as decided by the tender evaluation panel, as recommended by the tender evaluation panel, to proceed to the next stage of the procurement, which council's already agreed to.
So can I ask the chair to distribute the paperwork so that we can look at it properly, what Luke's just referred to, that he says that he hasn't distributed
so that's
full
the
report that he should have.
that was available to the public. When was that put out into the public?
November, late November, I think, from memory.
It was on display in the museum?
At the museum, but we can certainly arrange for that information to be sent to all councillors.
Circulate that to
it's not a problem.
Councillors?
We can do that.
It can be circulated to the councillors. All right, so any other questions, Councillor Kane?
I don't feel I'm in a position to be able to vote on something without the information, and the information should have been distributed 2 days ago when the report came out, 2 working days.
So if you, I'm going to ask for a motion.
It's fine for you. You've sat through the whole project, you know what you're voting on.
So, Councillor King, there's a process here that you can follow if that is your position. So I'm going to call, unless there's any other questions, I'm going to ask for a motion, and you're welcome to test a delay by putting a motion on the table.
So as the chair, you're comfortable to let us vote on this with the information we've been given?
I'm comfortable, yes.
But you know the background, you've sat through the
I'm
process.
comfortable with the information put before us and the content of this report in terms of my ability to make a decision. If you want to test your position, there is a process you can follow, and that process is to put a motion or an amendment. And that's the process.
This
Are
is
there any
it's an
other-
incomplete report, that's where it was.
So thank you, Councillor King, but as I keep saying to you, there is a process available to you to follow, and you are most welcome to follow that. Now, are there any other questions on this? Right? No? I'll
Yeah.
call, yes, Deputy
I'll
Mayor?
signal that I'll move the resolution.
Right, so are you going to move the resolution?
I have more questions.
Right,
Are you
okay.
ready?
I'll just check it, will there, a seconder for that? The motion, I'll second the motion. Okay, thank you, Councillor King. More questions?
So what does priority project mean in paragraph 17?
Priority project are the list of actions in the river plan that indicate the way in which the river plan will be given effect to, and they're over a staged period, and the Ferrybank is one of the priority projects that's identified as one of the early actions for implementation.
So what does that mean, earlier action for implementation? Can
Well,
you put a time frame around that?
Well, it's outlined in the report where we'll be seeking to complete, if a contract is executed, that will finalise a development plan and bring it back to council for July, August. So this project is about, in the river plan, talks about developing a development plan for Ferrybank, and that's a priority action.
So developing it as a priority action.
What we're currently talking about, the focus of this report, is consistent with the actions in the river plan, which sets out the priorities. Priority being, in the early stages, Ferrybank, the development of a development plan for the Ferrybank area is a priority action in the river plan.
Whose idea was this project?
Well, I'm presenting to you a report that's about a strategy that's been endorsed by this council, and about a project which is that has also been endorsed in terms of a procurement process. So the only way I can answer that in terms of whose idea is that this council has endorsed the river plan and has endorsed all of the stages, including everything that's been contained in this report. I'm just presenting to you the work that I need to discharge through the resolutions that have already been made by council.
What's this job going to cost?
Well, the project's
not the
$150,000.
No, the job itself, the finished project. I mean,
I can't answer that. I don't have that information, and having some idea about the rough order estimates for construction of it will flow through as part of this process. So those costs haven't been determined at any degree of accuracy, because you can't do that until you've got a development plan, and to develop those rough order costs would only happen as part of this next phase of the process that we're seeking your approval to commence.
So can I ask the CE, why are we going ahead with another step in a priority project when in the 10-year plan there's no money set aside for it?
So firstly,
Sure, there's the 150,000 conception plan, but I'm talking about the costs of building this project. Where's the money going to come from?
so firstly, Luke is correct that we're acting based on the resolutions that are in place. So that's the approach we're taking. In terms of the broader funding, the funding requirements will be identified through this next stage in terms as we progress down this track. I'm understanding there'll be some more meat on the bones at least.
There'll be some ideas around what the actual physical implementation costs will be, but the decisions around funding, and I've consistently said this every time I present a report about this matter, is there's $500,000 set aside in the LTP. Any future funding decisions are for a matter of this council or any other future councils. It's a 30-year project, and one of the things that will be looked at as part of the detail work for this will be the staging of this over a long period of time. Decisions around funding, they're matters for council, as they always are every time there's an LTP, to consider what they want to spend their budgets on.
So is it normal, CE, to go ahead, floating projects that the city can't afford and spending money. Yes?
So, sorry, look, Councillor King, I'm just really questioning the relevance of this, and I'll tell you why.
I would agree.
The council, whether you support it or not, the council has resolved to accept the river plan and the project timeframes contained in that. Secondly, the council has resolved to undertake this process. So the reason I'm questioning your relevance is because the council's actually resolved its position. You may not accept that position, but that's the position of the council. The staff are going away and implementing those council decisions. If you're not happy with any of that, there is a process on which you can undertake to ask for a resolution to be changed so that the staff don't go off and do sort of work that we've, decisions we've made. So I'm just really questioning the relevance of your questions to this report. They might be relevant in another context, but relevance to this report, given those two council resolutions.
Mayor Hardacre, we can stop this today
So again, Councillor King.
by putting up a resolution today because we're on subject.
Right.
We're talking about this area, and asking questions right now while we're talking about the river plan is a relevant time to be talking about
Right.
it.
So,
And a motion can be put today, and this can be stopped today.
so if that is your position,
It starts with
you
questions.
know
This is
the
question time.
process by which you can do that.
And this is question
because you've
time.
sat in this chamber long enough to know that process.
This is
So
question
if
time.
that is,
And this is asking questions
if you can
before
just
we put
stop
up a
while
motion.
I'm really clear about the process here, Councillor King. If that's your position and you wish to stop it, then you know what the process is. You put the motion up.
Right
right?
now, I'm asking questions in question time, pre the motions going up. There's no other time for me to ask these
I am
questions.
asking you to be focused on questions relevant to this report. So if you could continue to do that, that would be helpful.
I am asking questions about the river plan, about the Ferrybank. It is about this report.
So what's your next question?
Can I continue?
I'm asking you to carry on focused on relevancy. Thanks.
I'm asking the CE, is it normal for us to go ahead with projects which are going to spend huge amounts of money when the budget's just not there for it, when the 10-year plan hasn't allowed for it? It just seems all back to front. Surely we set the budget aside first and then take the next step.
So part of this process is firstly to work out what the commitment may well be. So it's about developing a straw man. It may be that once a straw man's developed, there might be discussions with council in the next 10-year plan phase to include additional funding for it. Or it may be that there's opportunities for seeking third-party funding. At this point in time, we don't have enough information to be able to hold those conversations. So part of the catalyst behind this master planning process is to develop a plan by which we can actually have those conversations with more robust information. So it's not unusual to build a straw man. We've got a strategic document that we've ratified as council, being the river plan. It's not unusual to do more work within that, and that's what the decision was made by council at the last 10-year plan, was to put aside some money effectively to, I'm using the word loosely, feasibility of that plan. And we've also made sure from a democracy point of view that we're going to bring that back to various stages, like, for example, today, like, for example, those workshops that Luke mentioned earlier, for council to have specific conversations around specific activities within that river plan as well. So it's not unusual in that context.
Would you agree that a job like this is probably hundreds of millions of dollars to finalise?
Do you need to answer that, Luke?
Look, it sounds like quite a high price tag. I wouldn't want to speculate as to what the costs are. I don't think it's helpful at this point until we've gone through this process, and then the council will have full information about what financial allocations would need to be made to deliver it.
And this council's said that they won't lift the rates above 3.8%. Is that correct, Richard?
Yep, so like I said, that this is a process by understanding more information. We're going to get, at the end of this process, a plan. That's going to make it a better informed decision about the possibilities of progressing with the river plan, what that looks like, and that will give this council and future councils a robust information for discussion and debate. When it comes down to it, as Her Worship has mentioned, this council has the opportunity to, number of opportunities to continue as we are, to adapt where we're going. It may be that this council decides that it likes the concept of leveraging the Ferrybank area but doesn't want any more buildings down there. There may be other options there, or it may be an option to stop. So this council always has that ability to make those decisions. And we hope, and we actually, I won't use the word hope, that's a little bit loose. We as staff always try to get in front of council as often as we can to give you those touch points so that you can have informed decisions with the right information. And I believe that's what we're doing through this process.
Any other questions, Councillor King? I've got the
Yes,
Deputy Mayor after you.
Is this land at the moment where you've got the buildings around on the river side of Grantham Street, is that in reserve?
Which building specifically are you referring to?
The land from the ANZ building south on the river side of Grantham Street. What status is that land in?
Are you talking about the proposed building that's identified as C?
The zoning of the land from the ANZ building south on the river side of Grantham Street, what is the zoning of that land?
It's open space zoning. I mean, I suppose to be clear on this particular matter, on this or indeed any other reserve matters, undoubtedly, depending on what comes out in the final concept, some part of the implementation may require changes to the reserve management plans, and it may require changes to parts of the district plan. But at this particular point, I don't know what those changes would be. That would be part of the implementation components of the final development plan. But large parts of that area are open space and have a reserve status.
So on a reserve status land, are you allowed to commercialise it for use separate to that piece of land, to draw people into that land? I mean, this is hugely commercialised when you look at what's on here. Even though we haven't been given plans, we've been given this plan, we don't know the heights of these buildings or what's going on there, unlike Councillor Gallagher and Her Worship the Mayor, who do know this information. We don't have it. But are we allowed to commercialise a piece of land that's been put in reserve?
I don't profess to be an expert on the Reserve Act, but my understanding is that you can have essentially the test for non-reserve activities are they consistent with the purpose of that reserve. So if you think of other areas in the city, we have cafes, etc., that are on reserves, and they are could be construed to be commercial purposes, but they're consistent with the purpose of the reserve. They provide a small-scale commercial offering for people using the reserve. That's an ancillary use to that particular reserve. Some of that other land that's indicated there, and these are some of the matters that need to be worked through, because parts of the land on Grantham Street isn't held in reserve, it's municipal endowment land. So that has a different status in terms of what can and can't occur there.
I'm talking about the land on the riverside of Grantham Street.
Yeah, so the land on the riverside, most of those, the concept here is not looking at commercialising those. So they're talking about a Waikato River Centre. That's is a community use, and then the rest of the buildings at the south and Roos Commerce are for recreational purposes. So whether or not at some point, if any of this was to be developed, if there were cafes, etc. there, and I put the caveat around it that I'm not an expert on the Reserve Act, but it's not unusual that we've got some very small scale type things like cafes in our reserves.
I haven't been given the pictures apart from this plan, but this looks like major development. There's a huge amount of this land being built on.
Well, once again, one of the components in the brief which the council signed off on was around the investigating the possibilities of amalgamating some of the rowing uses. So what this particular concept is that was assessed by the tender evaluation panel would show what those are essentially boat and rowing sheds, essentially, like at the southern part. And with the idea of a replacement of the current Ferrybank arrangements there with some sort of Waikato river centre, which which seems to be conceptually not a commercial land use.
So where the Hamilton Rowing Club is now, I think it's B on the picture.
Yes.
Have they tried to expand the floor print of their building in the past?
I'm unaware of any such consents that have been issued or any applications. I'm sorry, I can't answer that. But I think the important thing to note, though, is that what you see there in that diagram is not fixed. It's a concept. The next phase of it is to work out how much of this needs to be altered and provided more detail, so that it's something that is deliverable and achievable.
Can I ask Deborah, the planning manager, are you aware of the Hamilton Rowing Club? And that's gone through.
Sorry, Deborah, would you repeat what you said then?
Please stand up.
The Hamilton Rowing Club has a resource consent to expand. I understand there are some issues that haven't been sorted under the Reserves Act, but they have got a resource consent to expand.
So the thing that's holding it up is the fact that the building is on reserved land.
I wouldn't know, councillor.
You just said,
So they have a resource consent. My understanding is there are issues under the Reserves Act, but I don't know any more than that.
and we're proposing, Luke, to increase footprints or hugely develop this area, which is all on reserve land. And Hamilton Rowing Club's having problems with the Reserve Act just to increase the footprint of what they've got to use as a rowing club.
I can't comment about the status of the Hamilton Rowing Club's situation, but what I can tell you is that yes, this is the concept. Right, this is what we're seeking to take through into detail. Now, there are aspects around implementation that will be addressed through this process, and we've indicated that the final development plan for Ferrybank will have a range of actions for it to be implemented. Some of those will involve detailed construction, some of them might involve earthworks, some of them might involve additional landscaping, and some of them may require changes to our reserve management plans. They might require the applications for resource consent, they might require changes to our planning framework. I can't speculate as to what that suite of implementation actions will be, but that's all of those things are potential implementation components of what would be the final development plan.
Would you agree that land's put into reserve to protect it from commercialisation? Is that the reason why it's put into reserve, or one of the reasons?
Absolutely, and I think and I suppose it's important to note though that anything to change a reserved management plan would, as I understand it, would come back to this council for debate and discussion. There's multiple touch points by which this council can make decisions about that part of the city and the reserve status of that land. This project won't change the reserve status of that land down there.
Are you suggesting it's as easy to take land out of reserve land as a voter in the stable?
Look, I can't comment on that. I'm not an expert in the Reserves Management Act, and it's an area of practice that I don't work in.
Well, who's running this project?
Well, I'm the person providing this particular report, and I have the interim river plan responsibilities for this. There is a separate process about how you would change the reserve management plan.
Has that been looked into as part of this project? I mean, surely that's step one.
Yep, so there will be aspects. The river plan project, there are a number of parts of council that are part of the group in terms of the project group. Luke is interim project manager, and that will be looked at. At the moment, I'm stressing the word concept, but before any decision is made and before any information progresses, staff will be involved, councillors will get an opportunity to understand the consequences of those decisions and have input as well.
So the reserve status has been identified. We know that there is reserve land down there. We know that there's a separate process that you need to go through, and that any development on reserve land needs to be consistent with the purpose of that reserve. And I think this concept, what you see there, does that. It's not talking about providing large-scale commercial office blocks or big retail strips right down on the river on reserve land in some of the most important public areas of the city.
Just for clarification, Luke, the briefing pack that was part of the tender procurement process included all the reports and information on all of this, didn't it?
That's correct, and that's also was all publicly available on the website last year.
Yes, that's right.
So where building A is on your plan,
Yes.
what is that?
From recollection, that's municipal endowment land, and there are different.
Just to clarify, because municipal endowment land, you mean freehold land?
Yes.
Because municipal endowment doesn't sort of mean, it's just a status we add to it. It's freehold land, is that right?
Yes, that's my understanding.
So what is that footprint? What is that?
I don't know. Once again, I don't have the accurate measurements of that. It's a concept to be refined through this next phase of the process.
Does anybody know? Martin, Mayor Julie, what is footprint A?
So again, Councillor King, I'm not going to discuss the detailed discussions in the evaluation panel, but the area identified along freehold land around Ferrybank, this particular group have identified that as where they would focus their commercial attentions. And they were asked in the brief that was signed off by this council to provide options about commercial activity in balance with, the whole site.
So you know what A is, but you're not going to tell us.
It's not been identified as anything particular, but I
How
think
tall
I've
is it?
answered the question that
How
you've asked.
tall is A?
I've answered the question you've asked. Is there anything else you'd like to add to that, Luke?
Footprint A, how tall is it?
Is there anything else that you would like to add?
From memory, that we're looking at a sort of 3 to 4 story building. From the images, but once again, that's not locked in. That's what they presented as a concept, and it's that type of information and detail that needs to be tested and refined as we finalise the development plan.
A 3 to 4 story building?
Yes, from memory. If I recall the mocked up perspectives that they presented to the tender evaluation panel.
So what's the proposal? Are we going to build that, or are we going to sell the land?
There's no proposal. It's just the purpose of the concept is to show what development could potentially occur throughout the whole of the design brief area. That detail about what that might look may well be one of the elements of the final development plan, or it may follow as one of the implementations actions that come out of it. But we've not asked them to develop detailed architectural concepts and built ready schemes for every single part of this. That's not the purpose of the concept stage that we're in this project.
Do you think it's clear? Sorry,
Sorry,
can I just jump in
Councillor
for that?
Mallett, we've got
Alright.
Councillor King asking questions at the moment.
Do you
But I
think
do
a-
have you on the list after the Deputy Mayor.
Do you think a 3 to 4 story building there is going to dilute the city centre, draw business away from the city centre?
Well, importantly, the concept talks about that as being a range of uses, and from recollection, it was heavily focused around residential uses. So if it's focused around residential, it would be supportive of the CBD and supportive of and activating that public space down there.
So this is apartments.
It may be. It talks about it, the concept talks about a building that has got a range of uses, but from memory it seemed to be heavily geared towards residential. But once again, that's their concept. We have an ability through finalising this to be more definitive about what those land uses should be.
Is this under our Central City Transformation Plan? Is this area zoned for residential?
The Central City Transformation Plan doesn't zone anything. It's a non-statutory document. It's a policy document.
It's got 4 areas in it, and it says that it's very likely we'll be doing a variation to the district plan to enforce it. And what I'm asking is this area in the Central City Transformation Plan residential? Allow for residential?
Well, the Central City Transformation Plan talks about precincts, right, in terms of broad themes of activities in the CBD. It has no statutory weight. It's not zoning. It doesn't zone land.
It says in the document that a variation will have to be done to enforce the different areas as well.
But once again, that's an implementation action that hasn't commenced, and
So what I'm asking is this Ferrybank area in the Central City Transformation Plan allow for residential development?
look, I don't know the detail. I'd have to go back and check that the Central City Transformation Plan provisions as they relate to Ferrybank. But from my recollection, all of the precincts did not preclude residential development.
Okay.
Thank you.
Deputy Mayor, I've got you next.
Yes, thanks, Your Worship. Look, it was just a question to Richard. The next stage, once council approves the tenderer, which I'll call it step 1, step 2, which is the company developing the plan, that will then come to council. Will it presumably have more detail? Because is this like this list of the proposed development like a wish list? Will the proposed plan be more detailed? Will it actually have any sign of potential costings, potentially contributions from philanthropic trusts? And will council be able to accept or reject that plan if they don't like it?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So at any stage, council can pull the plug, and that's council's prerogative through the democratic process. So that's always on the table. The next stage will be more detailed. Whether it goes to the extent of identifying potentially funders and so forth, what it's going to come up with is a more detailed plan that's going to enable us to understand as a council what are some of the possibilities formed up, which then of course will enable us to have better information about what costings could be. Like most developments that we've done, if you look at the gardens, for example, we had a robust development plan for the gardens in terms of the strategic vision for that, and we worked alongside that in terms of funding options as well, and that's likely to be the case here. Once we have something robust in front of us, it will enable us to have a more robust discussion with potential funding partners and organisations in terms of progressing it. But we will have greater detail, which is I think the key here, which enables council to make more informed decisions.
Okay, Councillor Mallett.
Thank you. Luke, going back to the rowing club, that be on the concept plan.
Yes.
Have discussions been held with the rowing clubs? Do they have leases?
Yeah,
Yep.
well, the tender firms that were competing for for this project, as part of their work to form up their concepts, they have had conversations with those rowing clubs.
And so what's the feedback been from the rowing clubs?
Look, basically mixed. Some, from what I understand, there's on some aspects of willingness to relocate, and others that there isn't. And this is part of the work that will need to be, addressed as part of finalising the concept. And the additional consultation and discussions around those matters are part of the body of work that will, that we'll be executing, pending this contract being approved.
So this is all, I say this with the amount of respect it deserves, this is all quite fluffy, this, isn't it?
What's a concept?
Yeah. So, I mean, it's a concept that a new built edge is proposed along the northwestern side of the Victoria Street between the Celebrating Age Centre and the Grantham Street Gateway to the Ferrybank, comprising several buildings. This development would seat into the edge of the city plateau. What's the city plateau?
Well, these are the parts of the design elements.
But what is the city plateau? Because something's seating into it. I don't know what it is.
Well, it's the city. What this scheme is, the design, I guess, philosophy informing it is that it's formed by a series of terraces. So the plateau area is that area where you see building A is, and where those numbers sort of 1, 2, and 3 are, and that's that area they call the city plateau. Then it drops down again to a level between that building and Grantham Street. Then you across Grantham Street you come across to the to what they're proposing will be the Waikato Rowing or River Centre, and then it drops down again to the river. So that's the language of the firm that they've used to describe their concept. I think you've made some valid observations around communication in the final development plan, and that's noted. But essentially, yes, it is at a concept level because that's the stage that we're at.
Okay, so I appreciate the three firms got $10,000 each. So this is the result of the $10,000.
That's right.
Okay, so I appreciate there would have been no geotechnical work done, and at all.
Well,
there can't be.
We had a whole range of previous geotechnical investigations that have been previously done by council on a whole range of other stuff that we've just held as records, and that was all collated as part of the background information and went out when the tenders went out to indicate what the geological conditions were of the site.
Okay.
This particular team, though, has a geotechnical engineer on its team. The principal engineer from Tonkin Taylor, he's done 30 years of river stabilisation works in Hamilton. He was asked specifically at that evaluation about whether or not there was any issues around geotechnical stability and feasibility, and my recollection was that he answered that to say it could be delivered from a geotechnical perspective.
Okay, you'll have to forgive my scepticism given the state of our so-called asset management plans and the Victoria on the River expositions we've had recently, that I have very little confidence in a lot of what you're telling me. No disrespect to you.
None taken.
Good. That's good. Now, and this is alluding to what Andrew was saying. So far, we spent $30,000, and we're asking for some more money. I totally understand what you're doing. You're wanting to get a concrete. So the more work that the $150,000 will give us a more concrete plan. Is that right? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, and that's a plan which is a master plan, which doesn't say who's going to do it, doesn't say who's going to pay for it. Doesn't say when I might say when it's going to get done. I doubt it, but so that's that's the process we're going through now, eh?
Yeah, you're correct. The development plan will be silent about funding in terms of how it will be funded and who will fund it. I expect there will be some detail around staging and how it potentially could be staged, but it's not the consultant's job to make decisions about funding and how it can be funded.
They just put up a real neat concept, and it may, so they don't negotiate leases, they don't talk to existing users, they don't.
No, they will be talking to existing users,
okay.
as will council staff, to work with them in collaboration to help inform the final version of it.
Okay, And that will give us advice on what's reserve land, what's private land, what encumbrances there are on land.
Well, that information is known. That also was included in that background information that was sent out.
You'll have to forgive my scepticism of the information that is known, because we've had some very poor examples of it recently. Okay, so what we're doing is opening up an opportunity to spend, for someone to spend a truckload of money. And let's not kid ourselves, we're not talking small beer, we're talking tens of millions, possibly hundreds of millions of dollars.
It's likely to be in the millions,
Yeah.
but what that figure is, I'm just not in a position to make any accurate predictions or speculate as to the scale of the budget.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor McPherson?
Yes, just following up Gary's question when he was focusing on the more concrete plan, 150,000 job. I like the word concrete, given that the shifting sands, literally, that we have down along that area, and noting that Tonkin Taylor themselves have authored reports that have been out of date almost at the next thunderstorm along the bank. Seriously, and so have probably all the other major geotech people on there, and I'm wondering if the next study is going to specifically call for geotech studies, because I'd hate to see us do a nice plan that didn't address that issue, because that would seem to me, apart from funding overall, the biggest risk for doing anything along our riverbank.
Yeah, no, it's a good point, and geotech's always a risk for stuff on the river. I can just reiterate that we've pulled together all the existing work that we know that we held in house, made that available to the firms, and they've got and it's great that they've got a geotech engineer on their team, and they've been on that team to to give some realism about this concept. So this concept has been determined with the input of geotechnical advice. Now, albeit at a very high level, I take
and it's out of date. Some of the stuff we've got. Maybe it's all out of date. I don't know.
Yeah.
My query really is that are they going to say, don't come? Are we going to be saying to whoever does this report, don't come back unless you've addressed that issue, which includes test bores and things like that? Because it seems like otherwise we're setting up people to potentially fail.
Look, the level of geotechnical investigation is likely to be not significant as part of this, because we've got a budget. The budget's set, and once again, it's at a concept level. It's enough to inform land use zoning. So if you think of an analogy, when we do land use zoning, we don't comprehensively test every single parcel of land in the city.
But we have a duty of care. Let's think of the IRD building. We would not zone that for commercial space, knowing what we know now about the geotech underneath it, because we don't want one that's about to slide into the river anywhere. We have a responsibility in our planning. So it's not just to say, yes, you can put an office block up to there, but it's your total risk. We, as community, parts of community leadership, we need to be saying that, we won't allocate that land for this type of building or activity because it's we're not confident that it's stable, or we are confident it's stable, so we will allocate it.
Yeah, and it's a really good point, and it's something that I'm more than happy to, should the council resolve to execute the contract, to ensure that there's as much certainty around geotechnical issues as possible as we can through this particular process. But I suppose, I note all the recent difficulties we've had with the Victoria and the Rivers site. That, in my mind, has very unique site-specific geotechnical conditions about it, because it was a fill site on the edge of a bank. Most of what we're seeing here remains as park. Yeah, there are some new buildings, but they're stepped away. They're on land that's not steeply sloping. They're on land that we know that's not hasn't been subject to kind of fills, especially that stuff at the bottom end at Roos is mainly sand because of the bend in the river at that particular location up to a certain point, but then it doesn't have the same attributes as the VOTR site.
Well, it's true, it doesn't have the same attribute because it was part of the riverbed not so long ago.
That's right, yeah. So, but your points around ensuring that, have we got as much geotechnical certainty as possible is one that I am very happy to explore more should we execute the contract.
Thank you.
Okay, I have a motion, and that is the recommendation on page 6, item 12. Deputy Mayor, do you wish to speak to that?
Thank you, Your Worship. I've moved the resolution for a couple of reasons. The $150,000 spent is in the budget. The second point is that this is part of the selection of a successful tenderer, and that has been agreed, and so that is what we are voting on. My question also to the Chief Executive about the next stage was clearly answered, and while I accept that Councillor King had a number of specific questions, I think all of those questions are related to the receipt of the next stage of this journey. And the final point that I want to make is that this matter has been in the public environment. I was one of the few councillors that could be bothered turning up on a Saturday at the Waikato Museum to see a display, and you might well laugh, Councillor McPherson, to see a display of the concepts of those that were selected in the first part of the process. So to suggest that this has been thrown on the table today is quite wrong.
Okay, any other speakers for or against? No?
Yep,
Councillor King?
I'm
Councillor Gallagher, was that you too? Sorry, Councillor Gallagher, did you have your...
No.
No, okay.
I'm speaking and I urge you to vote against this motion to stop this right now. It's gone too far already. Firstly, the documentation should have been presented to this council to make an informed decision on this, and it hasn't been. We've discovered today that there's 3 to 4 story, sounds like there might be apartments going on this land. I shudder to think who's going to build it, because if it's council, it's going to cost at least double what the private sector would do it for. But should we be using this land for that in the first place? It's hard to argue that this land isn't being commercialised. This is reserve land that was put into reserve to protect it from commercialisation from our forefathers for future generations. We're going to be the council. Are you guys going to be the council sitting around here who's going to take that, who's going to vote, take another step forward to take reserve land and use it and commercialise it? Even if it's not heavily commercialised, I get one calf, like down at the river, down at the lake, but not multiple buildings. We've got rowing clubs that are understanding being asked to amalgamate after they've been running on their, not amalgamate, share buildings, sorry, when they've been fierce rivals for up to 100 years. Yeah, we hold all the cards. We hold the leases on the buildings. They'll do what they're told. A little bit arrogant, I'd say, on our part. We've got, this council has already voted to increase debt by $60 million above what some councillors around this table said they wouldn't do in the last election campaign. And here we are now, spending money going forward for the next 3 generations, next 30 years. We're going to lock people in. We're going to putting forward ideas, putting forward monuments to ourselves, where the money, projects and money that we haven't got now, there's no money for this, we know that, and we're spending money forward and proposing that things happen over the next 30 years. You only get to spend money once. I believe that this project originally, it's been driven by the Mayor. It was her brainchild. She was a part of the group who's proposed this. Some of us have had very little to do with this. The area floods. Twice in my lifetime I've seen the water up over Grantham Street. And mark my words, it will happen again. The dams were in place when I was a child, when they flooded last time, and when Lake Taupo gets up to a certain level, they have to let the water go. It's legislated that they have to let the water go. And this area through here on the river side of Grantham will flood again. It's sand, we don't know the stability of it, we haven't checked that yet. You'd think that would have been the first thing that we did. We've got people living in the city, we've got mums and dads who are living in the city who can't buy a section at the moment, where they'd like to buy a section. There are the selective odd sections that developers haven't picked up from the land developers, that the builders, they pick these sections up in lumps, and there's very little left for the people of the city. There's a shortage of sections in the city right now, and the reason for that is that we haven't got the infrastructure in the ground. We might have zoned land for 30 years. We might say, smugly pat ourselves on the back and say we've got 30 years land supply, but that land isn't spade ready. It's not ready to develop. And that's where we're dropping the ball. If we want to build a city, if we want to expand the city, if we want to make this a vibrant city, we've got to actually have land that's spade ready. People can buy. And the other thing that's doing, because it's not spade ready land, because we haven't got the infrastructure in the ground, their section prices are crazy. They're up to 300,000 plus now in the new releases. Because of the shortage, because of the supply issue, the price goes up. We've got peacocks, which we've promised for 30 years, 3 decades, we've promised to people out there that we'll put a bridge across, that we'll open it up, that we'll put infrastructure in. And then we've got pretty projects like this jumping the queue again. So that some elected members around this table can feel good about themselves, feel like they're doing something for the city. This is only going to dilute the problems we've got in the city further. We're building property down here which is going to bring people down into this area, which is going to dilute and make the problems we've got in our city worse, not better. I don't mind developing a park. I don't mind developing land that's in reserve as a park.
Someone going to move an extension? Okay, seconded.
I've got no issues with developing land as a park, but not when we start introducing commercial aspects to reserve land. So I'd urge you to think carefully, think responsibly, think about the ratepayer, think about the money you're spending for future generations for up to 3 decades in a row. And I don't mind how far entrenched you are in this project, how far you've got into it, just have a rethink. Because today's another critical vote along the way. Just a little vote to spend $30,000 originally, another little vote now to spend $150,000 of ratepayer money, and then there'll be lots of other little votes to put walking bridges within 200 metres of where we've got Victoria Street. We're proposing to put a walking bridge in. That's one of the projects. We've got multi-storey apartments that the city's going to build. I mean, we've only know this today because I've milked it out of staff. We're not supposed to know this, guys, sitting around this table. This is secret stuff. This has been held back from us. And I don't believe that this is a proper process.
Okay.
I believe we're being manipulated into voting for something that should stop right now. So just urge you to all stop and ponder and think about it carefully. Thank you.
Councillor Mallett.
Thank you. I also speak against the recommendation. I've used the analogy in the past that what we're doing here is lighting the fuse that's going to blow up in our face. And Andrew's recited the figures correctly. We started off with $30,000. Now we're approving $150,000. By the end of this step, we'll be up to $200,000. So the fuse has been lit, and it is already starting to cost ratepayers money. And we're going to get into some very significant money shortly. Council does have a role in developing the Riverbank area, and it's a very valid role. But that's a role in reducing planning, regulation, reducing the planning and regulation that is binding at the moment, holding up development. There are private developers, and I'm very aware of a few people who've bought property down there with a view to developing it for the city. The best thing we can do is speak with those people, let them get on their way. and do it in the time frame that suits them. Do it on the time frame that the market allows. Do it on the time frame whereby these people can do the developments. People will come and tenant those buildings, or shop at those buildings, or visit the facilities that are there. At the moment, we're going to embark on a steamroller approach where we are going to start forcing people out of their leases, community leases. We're going to start doing things to parks and reserves which are against the original purpose of the park and the reserve. What we are doing now is going to be Claudelands writ large. We are going to encumber the ratepayers and the citizens of this city, and Andrew's dead right, for three or four decades in terms of the spend we're looking at doing. Most of it will be uneconomic. Most of it will have to be funded by ratepayers and by debt. What we are doing here, as I said, is lighting a fuse that is going to blow up in the face of ratepayers for many, many years to come. Thank you.
Councillor Gallagher?
Number one, and I don't always disagree with Councillor King. In this case, I have a different perspective. One, what you are looking at and what you will be discussing in great detail when the final proposal comes back for your approval or otherwise is essentially a 20 or 30 year development concept. But like the university had a 20 or 30 year development concept, and look at the university today. Some of us are old enough to remember when it was basically bare fields. The process is that the design brief and process was approved and voted on by this council, I think back in July, 30th of July, by minority, right? There was a majority vote, so that's the tick box there. Out of that series of resolutions, a tender panel was set up to shortlist some concept designs, and those concepts were basically very much in the public arena, and there was a public display, as alluded to by the Deputy Mayor. When the final proposal from the successful tenderer, if that is awarded today, comes back, then obviously I would expect a very, very comprehensive brief, which will be covering a lot of things like the geotechnical stuff. The company would be here in this room, the members of the tender panel would be here, etc., etc. In terms of the process, what I would ask that we do ensure is, I'm just not sure if there's extra documentation that if an elected member had requested that before this meeting, if that was made available, and I'm just trying to get the balance between stuff that's already in the public arena as against also any other material that should be available for elected members in order to assist them to make, you know, an informed decision and to back up the recommendations of the tender panel. One thing I must stress is that the tender panel is an external body, and with the exception of 2 elected members, it was very much a professional process. I'm not saying that we were totally sitting there totally passive, but I assure you when the points and the evaluation, that was totally detached, and essentially the external members of the tender panel obviously did that. The key debate in this process will of course be later this year, and that will be the key decision where the majority of this council will decide, or otherwise, whether it was to carry on with this process, all right? At any time, a process can literally be killed. Council is always in charge of its own destiny. We've got another issue coming up on Thursday where we will reflect on a decision of a previous council. The debate carries on in this current council as to a separate course. Future councils can change this at their will. I slightly disagree, I think, with Councillor Mallet on this. I do see this very much as a 20 to 30 year, hope I'm around at the end, 20 to 30 year public-private partnership that evolves based on this plan. I see this very much as an incremental in terms of the city's spend, and I guess the key question is whether or not you believe or otherwise that this part of our river precinct over that period of time should be further developed as a public-private partnership along the lines of the Wellington waterfront, the Auckland waterfront, the Melbourne waterfront and other cities around the world. It's simple as that.
Councillor McPherson?
It's not often that I disagree with my dear friend Councillor Gallagher, but on this occasion, certainly in some respects I do. I would say that I, like probably everyone else in this room, would very much like to support a nice looking river precinct right through the city, not just in this area I might add. There are some other areas that look like noxious weed growth sort of colonies at the moment. They could do with some work as well. So it's not just this area that should have attention paid to it. But when I look at the nice photos, and I especially look at the timeline, I smell an election campaign rat, actually. I'm looking at coming back in July, August, just as the election campaign's getting going full swing, and I'm thinking, if we want to, looking at to commit future councils, why are we leaving it so late in the piece? Why not say, this is the decision for the future, that the future of this, to do with the future of the city, or one of the decisions that should be made, and it should be made by the incoming council, not right at the end of a previous council. So I wouldn't necessarily oppose this if it was early, this sort of thing, if it was early in a council term and it had some better idea of where the resource to make these developments might come from. To do it at the end of the term just makes me suspicious. I think this photo will look wonderful on some people's election leaflets, some candidates' election leaflets, but I don't think it's got anywhere near enough meat or idea about where the money's going to come from to go forward at this stage, and to have it come forward just before the election, right in the middle of the election campaign, leaves me totally cold. I don't support that sort of practice, and I haven't in the past. When Councillor Gallagher says that at any stage a process like this can literally be killed, and I'm quoting him, I just brings to mind some of the things like the V8s, which were incrementally decided on, and Claudelands, and where the message came through loud and clear, well, you've already committed to the first stage, you need to go to the next stage to see how far, you know, it should go, and then you need to go to the next stage after that. It became, as some of us who were involved have said, looking back, very hard to back off once you took the first step into the water. And I fear that we don't know how strong or how deep the water is that we're taking that first tentative step into. In fact, I'm sure we're, given some of the comments by Luke on the geotech issues that have been looked at, I think we've just got another pretty picture at the moment, which might come back to bite us until we get a few more facts and figures. And they're not facts and figures that we should be getting from 150,000 study. They're facts and figures we should be determining ourselves. And when we look at our long-term plan and our future spending plans and things like that, and then we should say, yes, it is realistic, or no, it's not. So I think we're a little bit putting the cart before the horse here, but I readily concede that it'll look wonderful on some people's election leaflets.
Right, any other speakers for or against? Yes, Councillor.
Yes, I wish to speak for the amendment. When you look back at the history of the Waikato River, I think many years ago it exited into the sea at Thames, and then eventually, of course, it's found its way down through Frankton, I understand, at one stage, about 2 million years ago, and now eventually it is where it is here today. Yeah, I wasn't around, Dave, in those days. I think what's happened is too many councils have actually got cold feet on this whole issue, and Councillor McPherson said that we have to put our foot into the water. And sure we do on this occasion, because when you look back at the Millennium projects and all that which was proposed through previous councils, everybody got a little bit excited and then nothing happened. And I think unless we've got the courage that we actually need to get this underway, because it's a little bit like the Hamilton Gardens, I suppose. Look at the coverages now which is happening with the Hamilton Gardens, which was in the early 70s a rubbish tip. there's so much which can be done, and already the people who appreciate the walkways along the river, and you've only got to walk any part of the river and you can see the number of cyclists out there, the number of pedestrians out there, and it's a way, I think, of bringing our community together. I think we've just got to suck it up, show a bit of courage, let's get on with it. It can be stalled if it's geotech proves that it's going to give way or whatever the case may be. But God, it's been there for a few thousand years now, and I can't really see that it's going to change a hell of a lot in the next few thousand years to come. So it's 150,000 which we have to look at, and it has been allocated. It was passed by this, well, it was recommended from this council, and I think all that staff have done is actually got on and done what we've asked them to do. So let's support it.
Are there any other speakers for or against? Just make some comments. I think this debate today has got well out of the context of what this report is about. The council approved this budget and approved this process last year, and this is just ticking the boxes as we go along the way. Sure, every opportunity some councillors have to debate the merits or otherwise of the river plan, sure, I'm sure they're going to take those opportunities. But at the end of the day, let's be very clear here. The council has signed off on a river plan which has been widely accepted by the community as a very, very good thing, because it gives a direction of travel and a plan for how that river will engage with the city. The second thing this council has done is signed off on a process and a project approved under that river plan to develop a plan about what that area might look like. It's not about the infinite detail of funding models. It's none of that. It's a plan about how it will look if over the coming years successive councils in the private sector commit to its development. That's what we've done. So how on earth people can start debating about it all without actually seeing it is quite beyond me, actually. This is what this process is about, to develop the detail, then we will have a plan. And then, like all good plans, it has components, and then you work your way through those components. And many people, including those around this table today, enjoy the pleasantries of the Wellington waterfront, New Plymouth Walkway, Auckland Viaduct, even Tauranga today. They don't start out of thin air, they start with a plan, and that's what we're doing. And I think today's debate has got well out of the context of what this is about. So councillors, I think we should just get on and get the plan done. And then there can be debates ad nauseum in successive councils about the merits or otherwise of projects contained in it. And I agree with you entirely, Councillor Tooman. There's been a lot of talk over the last 30 or 40 years, hasn't there? But nothing's ever happened. And sometimes it just takes courage to steer the course. And I thought what you said was absolutely right. Councillor, Deputy Mayor, you've got the right of reply if you wish to. Okay, we're going to vote on the board, thank you.
Carried 7 votes for and 4 against.
Thank you. Right, the council meeting is closed now and we are reconvening, I think. Councillor, you have a strategy and policy meeting starting at 2. I'll be back in here.